Hello, good morning and welcome to Thoughts and Updates here on a frosty Sunday morning in God's own country, Scotland, where the temperature has plummeted and there are -3s and -7s and minus everything being suggested as the current temperature on the west coast. It's worse elsewhere. I was hearing on Sportsound yesterday that up in Dundee they had a flurry of snow. So as we're in close to the middle of April and the Easter holidays, it has turned into being a glorious sunny day with a temperature that doesn't match. Just like you would expect from Scottish weather all the time. Two things that make no sense together. So, once read that if you don't like the weather in Scotland at the time, wait half an hour. There's another type of weather on its way. So 4 seasons in one day. Welcome to Scotland. This week, in terms of writing, let's get that out of the way to begin with. We've had a fantastic weekend of boxing where I have reflected on last weekend and Carol Frampton's decision to retire, or the right decision, absolutely, and last night some fantastic work down in the Copper Box Arena for Matchroom, where it was lit up not just by the main event, first round stoppage for Conor Benn, but also the Shannon Courtney and Ebony Bridges fight, which I'll come back to in a second. We also, I'm writing for Ringside Report, look back at Pinkland Thomas, which will go out during the course of the week, but also the wonderful story of the TV show Canon, which I loved as a young lad growing up in Scotland. For the Scottish Football Supporters Association, I'm going to reflect on the car crash that was Darrell Broadfoot's response to the criticism against referees, which is on Sportsound. Anybody who wants to cringe in embarrassment at anybody's defence of anything should go and have a listen, and especially when he suggested that Ian McCall as a manager and the record he had might colour his view when a fairly low blow, as said by Ian McCall, when Ian went off the the telephone, Darrell Broadfoot turned and said, "You wouldn't think that we got on?" At which point I will leave you to listening to what the people in the studio said in response to that. So that, and also my scurrilous little piece will be about Christophe Berra disappearing when Hearts are in crisis and having signed a contract. Well, he's not signed a contract, he's leaving Hearts. Not much happening in terms of theatre and fringe review, although in terms of writing in-depth piece, I have been spending a lot of time this week on the piece I was writing for Ringside Report about the Olympics in 1980 and the Polish Airlines crash, Lot 7, which wiped out the American boxing team. So, what have I learnt this week and what's been important? Two things, obviously. One of the things that's going to be prevalent over the next week is the death of Prince Philip at 99. I'm not a royalist. I don't believe in a monarchy. I don't believe in anybody having the right to assume the throne, any throne, on the basis of their heritage and lineage of their family. And would hope a more democratic system be put in place should we gain independence. However, I am well aware that the monarchy and the Queen in the United Kingdom has this particularly special place in a number of people's hearts, and I would look to change that, not by diktat, but by convincing them that actually having a president or an elected head of state would be far better for any country. But then again, in the shadow of people like Donald Trump, it's very hard to argue that at times. But when you consider that the family that's currently at the head of the royal family includes people like Prince Andrew, it is difficult to also argue the other case, that the monarchy should remain. They do a great deal of work for the country, they do a great deal of work for us, and Prince Philip did with the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme and his work in conservation a tremendous amount of positive things for the country. That's, for me, not hard to debate. They do, but there again, it could also be argued that in America the Kardashians do a great deal of work for the economy, and they also have access to promoting charities and foundations in a similar fashion. It's not something that convinces me that we should have a monarchy. The Scottish National Party is the Scottish Government. Part of the devolved governments of the United Kingdom will have a difficulty in how they respond, because they're going to have to demonstrate their allegiance to the Crown, which is part of being in a political system where you swear allegiance before you become an MP, an MSP, a member of the Welsh Assembly and so on. So they will have to put out a statement and indeed be very royalist in the context in which they do it, which in a sense may be a bit of a pity. It might be absolutely correct. It doesn't really matter. That's what's going to happen. However, the party I thought got it absolutely spot on was the Scottish Greens, who said we should join in mourning with a family who's lost a loved one in the context of the pandemic, where so many families have lost so many loved ones, and so many grandfathers and fathers and brothers have been lost, and cousins and so on. And I thought that that hit the absolutely correct tone, that we are in mourning for the loss of an individual in the context of a loss of thousands of individuals. So I don't like the fact that we ended up having a full day of television dedicated to HRH Prince Philip. A funeral next Saturday, I think, is absolutely well thought through. In the course of a pandemic, we are not going to ignore the rules that are there. Boris Johnson giving up his seat at the funeral for a family member is absolutely correct, and demonstrates for the first time in a long time, I think, that he has some political understanding of the way of the country. And family will mourn people who we have put at the top of the tree, and through no fault of their own, that's where they find themselves. So the change in things that are going to happen, sporting events being moved because people will be allowed to go and watch the funeral and so on, I don't think is right. But we live in a democracy, and I think the majority will see it as the right thing to do. Women's boxing is something that I'm just going to touch on because it's exploded. It's amazing. But what happened at the weekend was a fight between two elements of the promotion of women's boxing. The Australian Ebony Bridges, who plays to a stereotypical view of a woman, that she has lingerie as part of, or the glamour image as part of her appeal, and talks about how she will play to that appeal in order to get more eyes on the sport, against Shannon Courtenay, who found it very difficult because she doesn't believe that that stereotypical image should be used when there are fighters like Katie Taylor, Clarissa Shields, Savannah Martin. There are so many different female fighters who have destroyed that image by being dedicated sports people, and they should not be objectified in that manner. And the fight between the two meant the whole 10 rounds, 10 2-minute rounds, 20 minutes worth of exceptional high tension boxing, which ended with Shannon Courtenay winning. And of course, the argument might be that because she won, then her argument wins. I don't think that's the case. I think her argument wins because the objectification of women is wrong, and therefore, in order to promote women's boxing, it needs to go beyond that image. I'm not saying for a second that Ebony Bridges should not behave in the manner that she does, because I think that being who you are and doing what you do and promoting an image which is you should be allowed and allowable. I just think that the eyes that she's going to get on female boxing is not necessarily going to be the eyes that are going to stay, because they are only going to be looking for one particular reason. And I think it's a short-term, not a long-term strategy. And I think also what it does, in every walk of life, is it alters our view about human beings and their place within the context of a variety of things, including young women growing up and seeing how to be successful. So, glad that Shannon Courtenay Lynch is a Brit, therefore always back the Brit, irrespective of which particular country they come from. But I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, not only did the right boxer win, the right argument is seen to have won the day. And Ebery Bridges will go back to Australia, having lost her unbeaten record, and lick her wounds and hopefully come back. A very, very decent fighter, one-dimensional it may be, but very decent fighter. So, as I stand in the freezing cold with the glorious sunshine in the midst of a pandemic, which is almost at an end next week, I may well find myself getting in a car and going somewhere local in order to have as return to the original reason that I started all this, which was to find a place in order to talk about. And until then, bye for now.